The cream-colored envelope in my mailbox should have been a warning. My ex-wife Sloane, the woman who divorced me, poor, and humiliated me in front of all of Charleston, had just invited me to her wedding to some rich boy named Preston. But here's what she didn't know. While she was planning her perfect society wedding, I was quietly restoring a forgotten yacht that would change everything. The invitation said, "No hard feelings, front row," with that same cruel smile I remembered from our divorce. What happened when I showed up to her waterfront wedding by sea instead of by land would expose secrets that destroyed reputations, shattered her perfect day, and proved that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear. If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because what I did next will shock you. The mailbox creaked when I opened it, just like it had every day for the past 6 months. Bills, junk mail, and today, something different. A cream-colored envelope with my name written in fancy script, the kind of paper that cost more than I made in a day. I knew that handwriting before I even saw the return address. Sloane Whitaker, my ex-wife. The afternoon sun beat down on my shoulders as I walked up the 3 concrete steps to my apartment. The paint on my door was peeling, and the number 7 hung crooked. Not much to look at, but it was mine. All mine now. Inside, I set my lunchbox on the counter and grabbed a beer from the fridge. Only then did I open the envelope. Wedding invitation, Sloane and Preston Hale. Some guy I'd never heard of, but the fancy paper told me he had money. Course he did. That's what Sloane wanted all along. But it wasn't the invitation that made my hands shake. It was the note written in blue ink on the bottom corner. No hard feelings. Front row? I stared at those words for a long time. No hard feelings. Like she hadn't taken everything. Like her lawyers hadn't made sure I left with nothing but my tools and my truck. Like she hadn't told everyone I wasn't good enough for her. I folded the invitation and stuck it under a magnet on my fridge. A magnet from Tony's Pizza that I'd had since college. Everything else might be gone, but I still had Tony's magnet. I sat at my small kitchen table and took a deep breath. My jaw felt tight like I'd been grinding my teeth. Maybe I had been. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sloane's face the day she told me it was over. Cold, like I was a stranger she'd never loved at all. I got up and opened the closet. In the back corner sat a single cardboard box labeled Marcus Personal in Sloane's neat handwriting. Everything that was left of my 5-year marriage fit in one box. I pulled it out and sat on the floor. Inside, a photo of us on our honeymoon, my favorite torque wrench, and a few other things her lawyers decided weren't worth fighting over. The photo showed us on a dock in Key West. Sloane was laughing at something I'd said, her blonde hair blowing in the wind. I had my arm around her waist, and we both looked so happy, so sure we'd make it. I remembered that day. We'd spent hours walking around the marina, looking at boats. Sloane kept pointing to the big yachts and saying, "Someday when Dad gives me control of the hotels, we'll have one just like that." But someday never came, at least not for us. I put the photo face down in the box and picked up my torque wrench. My dad gave it to me when I graduated trade school. "A man's only as good as his tools," he'd said. "Take care of them, and they'll take care of you." Dad was right about that. My tools never let me down. Can't say the same about marriage. I thought about Sloane's lawyers, how they'd made me feel like dirt under their fancy shoes, how they'd talked about me like I wasn't even in the room. "Mr. Reed will be fine," one of them had said. "He's got a trade. He can start over." Start over. Like 10 years with someone meant nothing. I put everything back in the box and closed it. Then, I picked up my phone and sent a text to Tito. "You still got that hull behind Sea Dock?" The reply came back fast. "Come at sunrise." Tito Alvarez had been like a father to me since I started working at the marina. He knew boats better than anyone, and he never asked questions when a man needed time to think. I set my alarm for 5:30, and finally went to bed. The marina at sunrise was my favorite place in the world. Mist hung over the water, and the boats rocked gently in their slips. Everything was quiet except for the sound of water lapping against the hulls. Tito was waiting for me at the end of Sea Dock, holding 2 cups of coffee. He was a small man with gray hair and calloused hands that had fixed 1,000 boats. He'd been running the marina for 20 years, and everyone respected him. "Morning, Marcus," he said, handing me a cup. "How you holding up?" "I'm all right," I said. We both knew that wasn't exactly true, but Tito didn't push. He led me down a narrow walkway to a section of the marina I'd never paid much attention to. Older boats that hadn't run in years, boats that people had given up on. "There she is," Tito said, stopping in front of a weathered white hull. She was beautiful, even covered in dirt and bird droppings. A 1960s Whitby motor yacht, maybe 35 feet long. The kind of boat they don't make anymore. All wood and brass and clean lines. "She's been here 3 years," Tito said. "Owner died and his kids don't want her. But yesterday, something interesting happened." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Mrs. Harrell came by. You remember her?" I nodded. Mrs. Harrell was an elderly woman who lived near the marina. Last winter, her car wouldn't start in the cold, and I'd fixed it for free. She'd tried to pay me, but I wouldn't take her money. "She heard about your situation," Tito continued. "Bought the boat from the estate. Title's clean, mortgage is paid for a year. Only condition is that you make her run again." I looked at the envelope, then at the boat. Why would she do that? "Because good people help good people," Tito said simply. "That's how the world's supposed to work." I opened the envelope. Inside was a clean title with my name on it and a short note. "For kindness repaid. Make her proud. Eleanor Harrell." I climbed aboard and put my hand on the steering wheel. The boat shifted slightly under my weight, but she felt solid, strong, like she was just waiting for someone to wake her up. "I'll make her run," I said quietly. Tito smiled. "I know you will." By 10 o'clock, I was back at the boatyard for my regular job, but my mind kept drifting to the Whitby. During lunch, I walked over to take another look. Darius Cole found me there. He was head of security at the marina, and we'd become friends over the years. Darius was the kind of man you wanted on your side when trouble came around. "Heard about your new boat," he said, offering me half his sandwich. "News travels fast around here." "Tito's proud of you. We all are." Darius sat down on the dock. "But I also heard something else. Word is, your ex is getting married." I didn't ask how he knew. The marina was like a small town. Everyone knew everyone else's business. "Yeah," I said, "this weekend." "You going?" Thinking about it, Darius was quiet for a minute. "That's a dangerous game, brother." "Maybe, but I'm tired of hiding." My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't come to the wedding. It'll be ugly. Trust me." "E." I showed Darius the message. He frowned. "Who's E?" "Emma, Sloane's younger sister." Emma had always been different from Sloane, quieter, kinder. She'd tried to stay neutral when everything fell apart, but I could tell it hurt her to see what happened. I typed back, "Not planning any drama." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. "You know what you're getting into?" Darius asked. "Probably not," I said. "But I'm done letting them think they broke me." I walked back to the Whitby and climbed aboard. In the cabin, I found a piece of chalk and wrote on the wall, "Fuel lines, ignition hull, patch electrics." 4 things stood between me and getting this boat running. 4 things I could control. It felt good to have a plan. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work. I'd finish my shift at the boatyard, then spend every free minute on the Whitby. Fuel lines first. They were cracked and needed replacing. Then ignition. The old system was shot, but I'd rebuilt plenty of engines in my time. On the third day, Tito stopped by to check my progress. "How's she coming?" he asked. "Good. Real good." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Want to help me try something?" I'd been working toward this moment for 3 days. Time to see if all the sweat was worth it. I turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, then caught. With a smooth rumble, music to my ears, Tito clapped me on the shoulder. "She's yours now, officially. A boat that runs is a boat that's loved." I couldn't stop grinning. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, like I could build something instead of just watching everything fall apart. "Take her for a test run," Tito said. I untied the dock lines but kept a safety rope attached. The Whitby responded like she'd been waiting for this moment. Smooth and steady, engine purring like a cat. "How's she feel?" Tito called from the dock. "Like coming home," I said. And that's exactly what it felt like. This boat didn't care about my bank account or my apartment or my failed marriage. She just wanted someone who'd treat her right and make her run. I could do that. That evening, I studied the harbor charts spread across my small kitchen table. The wedding was in 2 days. Church ceremony downtown, then a reception at the harbor, right where my boat lived. Emma had texted me the details earlier. Church at 4, reception at the harbor pavilion starting at 6. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. I wasn't planning to make anything hard, but I also wasn't planning to hide. My phone rang. "Darius, you still thinking about going?" he asked. "Yeah." "Want some backup?" "I could take the weekend off, stick around the marina." "You don't have to do that." "Rich boys sometimes get brave when they think nobody's watching," Darius said. "I'd rather be there just in case." I looked at the harbor chart again. The reception site was right on the water, less than a quarter mile from my slip. "Thanks, Dee. I appreciate it. What are friends for?" After we hung up, I went to my closet and pulled out my one good suit, navy blue, bought for job interviews that never went anywhere. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and it fit. I folded it carefully and put it in a garment bag. Tomorrow, I'd take it to the boat. Outside my window, I could see the lights of the marina. Somewhere out there, the Whitby sat in her slip, ready for whatever came next. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Whatever happened, I'd face it on my own terms. No more hiding, no more shame. Just a man, his boat, and the truth. That would have to be enough. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. I'd barely slept, but I felt more awake than I had in months. By 7, I was at the marina with a bucket and some brass polish. The Whitby deserved to look her best today. A few of the dock workers stopped by to help. Jimmy brought extra rags, and Carlos had some chrome cleaner that made the railings shine like mirrors. These guys had watched me work on her all week, and they seemed to understand what today meant. "She's looking real good, Marcus," Jimmy said, stepping back to admire our work. "Thanks for the help." "You nervous?" Carlos asked. "Some," I admitted, "but mostly I'm ready." Around noon, I saw a fancy black car pull up to the harbor pavilion. A tall white man in an expensive suit got out and started barking orders at the catering staff. Had to be Preston, the groom. Even from a distance, I could tell he was the kind of man who thought money made him important. Tito appeared with his phone, casually filming the guy throwing his weight around with a vendor. "Just documenting marina activity," he said with a wink. "You never know when security footage might come in handy." I showered in the marina's facilities and put on my suit. Nothing fancy, but it was clean and pressed. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. 6 months ago, I'd been broken. Today, I stood straighter. At 3:30, I fired up the Whitby's engine and cast off the dock lines. The harbor was calm and she cut through the water like she was born for this moment. The church bells were ringing when I rounded the point and saw the reception site. White tents, flowers everywhere, and people in expensive clothes standing around with champagne glasses. The kind of party Sloane always wanted. I could see guests starting to move from the church to the harbor, cars pulling up, couples in fancy clothes stepping out. The sun was getting lower, painting everything in golden light. A murmur went up from the crowd as the Whitby came into view. People stopped talking and pointed. Phone cameras came up. This wasn't what they expected to see. I brought her in smooth and easy like I'd done it 1,000 times. The dock was public. I'd checked, and I had every right to be there. A few marina staff members caught my lines and helped me secure the boat. Preston was standing near the water, and I watched his face change when he realized who was stepping off that boat. His jaw got tight, and he whispered something sharp to a man in a security uniform. I nodded politely to the catering staff I recognized from the marina and found a seat in the back of the reception area. I wasn't here to cause trouble, just to show that Marcus Reed was still standing. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the security guard said, walking over with Preston right behind him. I pulled out my docking permit and showed it to him. "I'm properly moored with all required permits. This is a public dock." The guard looked at the paperwork, then at Preston. "He's got the right papers." Preston's face went red. "I don't care about papers. I want him gone." "Sorry, sir," the guard said. "Can't remove someone who's legally here." I smiled politely and didn't say a word. Sometimes the best response was no response at all. The bride and groom posed for pictures near the water while I sat quietly in the back. Sloane looked beautiful in her white dress, just like I knew she would. But there was something in her eyes when she glanced my way. Uncertainty, maybe. Like seeing me here wasn't quite the joke she'd thought it would be. Emma appeared at my elbow. "Marcus," she said quietly, "please don't let him bait you into something stupid." "I won't," I said. "I'm not here to make trouble." "Then why are you here?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because I'm tired of hiding." Emma looked like she wanted to say more, but Preston called her name from across the reception area. She squeezed my shoulder and walked away. As the sun got lower, more guests arrived. I recognized some faces from Sloane's social circle, rich people who'd never given me the time of day when I was married to her. Now they stared at me like I was some kind of curiosity. Two freelance photographers showed up with fancy cameras, society bloggers from the look of them. They snapped pictures of the boat, the happy couple, and the mysterious guest sitting in the back. One of them walked over to Jimmy, who was tending to some dock equipment nearby. "That's a beautiful boat," she said. "Whose is it?" "Belongs to Marcus there," Jimmy said, pointing at me. "Fixed her up himself. She's a real beauty." The blogger's eyebrows went up. This wasn't the story she'd expected to find. As the reception went on, I could see Preston getting more and more agitated. He kept glancing at the boat, then at me, then at the photographers. This wasn't going according to his plan. Emma walked past me again and dropped a folded napkin on my table. I waited until she was gone before opening it. "Bridge loan against Sloane's future shares. Preston's gambling markers," it said in Emma's handwriting. I read it once, folded it back up, and put it in my pocket. Whatever games Preston was playing with Sloane's money weren't my business anymore. I wasn't here to save her. That ship had sailed a long time ago. But it did explain why he was so nervous about me being here. A man with secrets didn't like unexpected guests. The band started playing, and couples moved to the small dance floor set up on the dock. I watched Sloane dance with her new husband, her white dress flowing in the harbor breeze. She looked happy enough, but I could see her eyes searching the crowd, looking for me. Preston broke away from the dancing and walked straight toward my table. His smile looked painted on. "Marcus," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "What a surprise to see you here." "Sloane invited me," I said simply. Right, right. Well, listen. He pulled out his wallet. I know things have been tough since the divorce. How about I help you out? Say, 5,000 cash to call it a night? Let my wife enjoy her special day without any complications? I looked at the money, then at him. $5,000 was more than I had in the bank, more than I'd see in months of boat repair work. I pulled out my phone and hit record. That's generous of you, Preston, I said clearly. But I'm not looking for money. I'm just here to celebrate Sloane's happiness. His fake smile wavered when he realized I was recording. You can turn that off. It's a public place, I said. I'm free to document my own conversations. He looked like he wanted to say more, but people were starting to stare. Instead, he pocketed his wallet and walked away, his face red with anger. I stopped the recording and put my phone away. Sometimes the truth was the best weapon you could carry. As the evening wore on, two of Preston's friends started hanging around the edge of the dock, making loud jokes about uninvited guests and people who don't know their place. They weren't talking to me directly, but they wanted me to hear. My phone buzzed. Text from Darius. See the two clowns by your boat. Stay visible. I'm nearby. I looked around and spotted Darius near the pavilion entrance in casual clothes but alert. Just knowing he was there made me feel better. Emma walked past the bar and tried to catch her sister's attention. Sloane, she called. Can I talk to you? Not now, Emma, Sloane said without looking away from her guests. Just manage the situation. What situation? You know what I mean. The optics. This looks bad. Emma's face hardened. Marcus isn't doing anything wrong. He's just sitting there. That's the problem, Sloane snapped. He's making it weird. No, Emma said, her voice carrying more steel than I'd ever heard from her. You made it weird when you invited him as a joke. Sloane looked like she'd been slapped. Emma walked away without another word. Around 10 o'clock, the wind picked up and the boat started moving gently in her slip. The dock lines creaked and the fenders squeaked against the pier. Normal boat sounds, but they seemed louder in the evening quiet. I found myself standing with a small group of dock workers who'd been sharing food from the caterers, guys who'd known me for years, who respected the work I'd done on the Whitby. Tito raised his beer bottle. To honest work, he said. To honest work, we echoed. For a moment, I felt completely at peace. These were my people. This was my world. I belonged here just as much as anyone in $1,000 suit. Across the reception area, I saw Sloane watching our little group. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen in years, something that looked almost like longing. She used to be part of this world, back when we were first together, before her father's money and her friends' opinions made her ashamed of where she came from. I raised my bottle slightly in her direction. Not a toast exactly, just an acknowledgement that I saw her looking. She turned away quickly and rejoined her wedding guests. By midnight, the reception was winding down. The band packed up their equipment and guests started saying their goodbyes. I figured it was time to head back to the boat and get some sleep. I walked down the dock to check the lines one more time before turning in. Something felt off as soon as I got close to the slip. Two of the stern lines were half untied, not loose from wind or tied, deliberately loosened. The boat was drifting toward the hull in the next slip, and if the wind picked up any more, she'd scrape. I jumped aboard and fired up the thrusters, using them to push away from the other boat, missed a collision by maybe 6 inches. My heart was pounding as I retied the lines, this time with extra knots. I looked around the dark marina, but whoever had done this was long gone. Could have been Preston's friends. Could have been anyone who thought it would be funny to mess with the uninvited guest. I sat in the cockpit for a long time after that, listening to the water and trying to calm down. Part of me wanted to march back to the reception and demand answers, but that would just give them what they wanted, a scene, some drama they could use to paint me as the bad guy. Instead, I stayed put and felt the anger turn into something colder, something more focused. I pulled out my phone and listened to the recording of Preston's offer again. Then, I looked at Emma's note about the gambling debts. Then, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Tito's number. "One last thing in the morning," I texted him. "Quiet." His response came back immediately. "Whatever you need." I watched the sun start to come up over the harbor. The reception site was empty now, just scattered napkins and wilted flowers. The happy couple was probably in some fancy hotel suite, counting their wedding gifts, but I was still here, still standing, and tomorrow was going to be very interesting. The Whitby rocked gently beneath me, solid and dependable. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The morning sun painted the harbor in shades of gold and pink. I'd been awake for hours, sitting in the cockpit with a cup of coffee, watching the city come alive. My eyes were red from lack of sleep, but my mind was clear. I'd made my decision sometime before dawn. Preston's recorded offer played again on my phone. $5,000 to disappear, to let them pretend I didn't exist. The words sounded even uglier in the morning light. Emma's note about the gambling debts sat folded on the table next to me. I wasn't going to save Sloane from her husband's problems, but I wasn't going to let them keep treating me like garbage either. My phone buzzed. Text from Emma. "I'm sorry about last night. I know it was them." I typed back, "Not your fault." Three dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "What are you going to do?" "Something quiet," I replied. I started the engine to let it warm up, then sent texts to Tito and Darius. "One last thing this morning. Quiet." Both replied quickly. These were good men who had my back when it mattered. The harbor was peaceful at this hour. A few early fishermen heading out, seagulls crying overhead. In a few hours, this same spot would be full of people again for the wedding brunch. The same people who'd watched Preston's friends mess with my boat. Time to show them who Marcus Reed really was. By 9 o'clock, the catering crew was setting up tables at the pavilion again. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, mimosas on silver trays. Wedding brunch for people who had so much money they needed two parties to celebrate. Tito appeared at my slip with a toolbox and a grin. "What do you need?" "Remember those dock speakers you use for safety announcements? The ones tied into the pavilion's PA system?" His grin got wider. "Those speakers? Those are the ones. Think they need a sound check this morning?" "Absolutely. Safety first at the marina." Darius showed up a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of casual clothes that didn't hide the fact he knew how to handle trouble. "Morning, brother," he said. "What's the plan?" I showed them the recording on my phone and Emma's note about Preston's debts. "Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just the truth." Tito nodded slowly. "Sometimes the truth is the loudest sound of all." "What do you need from me?" Darius asked. "Just keep an eye on Preston's two friends. Make sure they don't get any bright ideas about starting something." "Consider it done." I looked at both men, friends who'd stood by me when everything fell apart. "You sure about this? You don't have to get involved." "Marcus," Tito said, his voice serious, "I've been running this marina for 20 years. I've seen plenty of rich boys come through here thinking they own the place. Someone needs to remind them that respect isn't for sale." Darius nodded. "Besides, you're family. Family looks out for each other." Family. The word hit me harder than I expected. These men weren't related to me by blood, but they'd been more loyal than my actual wife. Guests started arriving around 10:30. Same expensive cars, same expensive clothes. The bride and groom looked tired but happy, posing for more pictures near the water. Preston kept glancing toward my boat, probably wondering if I'd finally taken the hint and left. His jaw was tight, and I could see him scanning the crowd like he was looking for threats. The pavilion filled up with the soft sounds of polite conversation and clinking glasses. Toasts began around 11, with various friends and family members standing to share stories about the happy couple. I caught Tito's eye and nodded once. He walked casually to the sound booth where the wedding coordinator was managing the microphone system. "Morning," I heard him say. "Just need to do a quick safety check on the PA speakers, marina policy." "Oh, okay," the coordinator said. "How long will it take?" "Just a few minutes, won't interrupt anything." Darius positioned himself near Preston's two buddies from last night. They were nursing Bloody Marys and making the same loud comments about uninvited guests. Darius didn't approach them, just stood close enough to move fast if needed. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio files I'd prepared. Preston's recorded offer from last night. The video Tito had taken of Preston bullying the vendor. And one more thing Emma had sent me during the week. A recording from her phone of Preston using a racial slur about the dock crew when he thought no one was listening. My finger hovered over the play button. Once I did this, there would be no going back. Preston would know exactly who was responsible. But I was tired of being quiet, tired of letting people think they could walk all over me because I fixed boats for a living. I looked across the pavilion at Sloane. She was laughing at something one of her bridesmaids said, but there was tension around her eyes. Emma stood a few feet away, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Time for the truth. I gave Tito the signal. He nodded to the wedding coordinator. "All set with the safety check. Thanks for your patience." The first recording started playing through the speakers. Preston's voice, clear as day. "I know things have been tough since the divorce. How about I help you out? Say, 5,000 cash to call it a night. Let my wife enjoy her special day without any complications." The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Everyone looked around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. Then, my voice. "That's generous of you, Preston, but I'm not looking for money. I'm just here to celebrate Sloane's happiness." Preston's face went white, then red. He spun around, looking for the source of the recording. The second audio file began. Preston's voice again, but nastier this time. The racial slur, casual and ugly, talking about the help like they weren't even human. A few guests looked genuinely shocked. Others just looked uncomfortable, like they'd heard this kind of talk before but didn't like hearing it in public. The final recording was the video Tito had taken. Preston's voice demanding free services from vendors, threatening to ruin their businesses if they didn't comply. When the speakers went quiet, the pavilion stayed silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, conversations began again. But they were different now, hushed, serious. I watched a woman in an expensive dress, one of Sloane's board members from the look of her, quietly stand up and walk to her car without saying goodbye. Others followed. Not everyone, but enough to notice, enough to matter. Preston was scanning the crowd with wild eyes, trying to figure out who was responsible. His gaze landed on me sitting calmly at my table, and understanding hit him like a slap. He started walking toward the sound booth, probably to demand answers from the coordinator. That's when Darius stepped smoothly into his path. "Excuse me?" Preston said, trying to push past. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" Darius said pleasantly, not moving. "Get out of my way." "Public space," Darius replied with a smile. "Just enjoying the harbor breeze." Preston's two friends moved to help him, but stopped when they saw the size of Darius's shoulders. Smart move. Sloane stood frozen near the gift table, her face pale. Emma was beside her, holding an envelope I hadn't noticed before. The band had stopped playing. Servers moved awkwardly between tables, unsure whether to continue serving or start cleaning up. "Did you know?" I heard someone ask. A man in a navy blazer was looking at Sloane with raised eyebrows. "Know what?" she managed. "About your husband's business practices." Sloane opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she say? That she knew Preston was trying to bribe her ex-husband? That she'd heard him use racial slurs about the marina staff? Or maybe she really didn't know. Maybe she'd been so focused on getting the perfect society wedding that she'd never bothered to find out who she was really marrying. The pavilion was half empty now. Word traveled fast in wealthy circles, and people were making excuses to leave. Nobody wanted to be associated with whatever this was turning into. Preston finally broke away from Darius and stormed toward the microphone. "This is ridiculous," he announced to the remaining guests. "Someone is playing games with audio equipment, trying to ruin our special day." His voice cracked slightly on the last words. "Are you saying those recordings were fake?" asked a woman I recognized as a society reporter. Preston's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He couldn't claim they were fake without risking someone analyzing them, but he couldn't admit they were real either. "I'm saying this is neither the time nor the place for whatever this is," he said finally. The reporter was already typing on her phone. By tomorrow, this story would be all over Charleston's social media. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Emma standing behind me. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Privately?" I followed her to a quiet section of the dock, away from the chaos at the pavilion. She was holding that envelope, turning it over in her hands. "Did you do that?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" I looked out at the harbor, where a few sailboats were heading out for a day on the water. Normal people doing normal things, while 50 yards away, a wedding was falling apart. "Because I was tired of them laughing at me," I said simply. Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Sloane asked me to give you this." She held out the envelope. I took it but didn't open it. "What is it?" "Pictures. From before everything went bad between you two." I could feel something thick inside the envelope. "Photos, maybe." "Why now?" "I think she's remembering who you used to be to her, before the money and the pressure and all the rest of it." Back at the pavilion, I could see Preston arguing with vendors who were demanding payment. His credit cards were getting declined, and his face was getting redder with each failed transaction. The venue manager was trying to mediate, but it was clear this brunch was over. Guests were leaving faster. Now, not bothering with polite excuses. Sloane sat alone at the head table, still in her white dress, watching her perfect day crumble around her. I walked back toward the Whitby, envelope still unopened in my hand. Emma fell into step beside me. "What now?" she asked. "Now I go home," I said. "Are you happy about what happened?" I thought about that question as we reached my boat. Was I happy? Preston had been exposed as the kind of man he really was. Sloane's society friends had seen the truth about their golden couple. But looking back at her sitting alone in her wedding dress, I didn't feel triumph, just tired. "I'm not happy," I said finally, "but I'm not hiding anymore either." Emma nodded like she understood. "That's something, I guess." I stepped aboard the Whitby and untied the dock lines. The engine turned over smooth and strong, like always. "Marcus," Emma called as I started to pull away from the dock. I looked back at her. She really did love you, you know, before everything else got in the way. I nodded once, then turned my attention to the harbor ahead. The Whitby cut through the water clean and straight, carrying me away from the wreckage of someone else's perfect day. Behind me, I could hear Preston shouting at his remaining guests, but his voice got smaller and smaller until it was lost in the sound of the engine and the wind. I had the envelope Emma gave me, but I wasn't ready to open it yet. Some things were better left for later, when the emotions weren't so raw. For now, it was enough to be moving forward. To know that Marcus Reed was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to disappear. The harbor stretched out ahead of me, wide and blue and full of possibilities. 3 days later, the harbor felt different, quieter, like the whole place was holding its breath after what happened at the wedding brunch. I was sitting in the cockpit of the Whitby, drinking my morning coffee and watching the sun come up over the water. The envelope Emma had given me sat on the table, still unopened. I'd picked it up a dozen times over the past few days, but something always stopped me from looking inside. Maybe I wasn't ready to remember what Sloane and I used to be. Maybe it was easier to focus on what we'd become. My phone had been buzzing all week with messages I didn't answer. Unknown numbers, probably reporters wanting my side of the story. A few friends from the old days who'd heard about the wedding through social media. Even a text from my mom in Atlanta. Saw the news online. You okay, baby? I'd texted her back, I'm good, mom. Really good. And for the first time in months, that was actually true. Jimmy walked down the dock with a newspaper under his arm. Morning, Marcus. You see this? He handed me the Charleston Post and Courier. There on the society page was a photo from the wedding brunch. Preston's red face as he argued with a vendor, guests walking away in the background. The headline read, Society Wedding Ends in Scandal. I skimmed the article. They'd been careful with the legal language, but the message was clear. Preston Hale's reputation was finished in Charleston. The gambling debts, the bribes, the racist comments, it was all there, laid out in black and white. How's it feel to be famous? Jimmy asked with a grin. Like I need more coffee. But honestly, it felt like closure. For months, I'd been carrying around this weight of shame and anger. Now it was out in the open, and somehow that made it lighter. Tito appeared with his own coffee mug. Sleep okay? Better than I have in a long time? Good, you earned it. He sat down on the dock. Got a call this morning from Mrs. Patterson. You know, the lady with the big sailboat. She heard about your work on the Whitby. Wants to know if you're taking on restoration projects. I raised an eyebrow. Serious? Dead serious. Seems like word's getting around about your skills. Might be the start of something good. The idea of running my own boat restoration business had never really occurred to me. I'd always worked for other people, fixed their boats, taken their orders, but sitting here on my own deck, looking at what I'd accomplished with the Whitby, it didn't seem impossible anymore. I'll think about it, I said. Around noon, I saw a familiar figure walking down the dock. Emma, in jeans and a simple white shirt, looking nothing like the put-together wedding coordinator I'd seen a few days ago. Permission to come aboard? She asked. Of course. She climbed onto the boat and sat down across from me. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping much either. How's Sloane? I asked. Not great. Preston left yesterday, took what he could carry and disappeared. Lawyers are already calling about the debts. I felt a stab of something, not quite sympathy, but not satisfaction either. I'm sorry. Are you? Yeah, I didn't want to ruin her life. I just wanted her to see mine was worth something too. Emma nodded slowly. She knows that now. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the harbor traffic. A pelican landed on the dock nearby and stared at us with ancient, knowing eyes. She wants to apologize, Emma said finally. She doesn't need to. Maybe not for you, but she needs to for herself. I picked up the envelope from the table and turned it over in my hands. What's really in here? Look and see. I opened it carefully. Inside were maybe a dozen photographs, all from the early days of our relationship. Sloane and me at a barbecue restaurant, both of us laughing with sauce on our faces. Me teaching her to fish off a dock much like this one. Her in my old work shirt, hair in a messy ponytail, helping me paint a friend's boat. In every picture, we looked happy. Not the posed perfect happiness of wedding photos, but the real kind. The kind that comes from actually enjoying each other's company. She kept these? I asked. In a box in her closet. Never showed them to Preston. The last photo was different. Sloane asleep in the cabin of a small fishing boat, curled up in an old blanket. I remembered that day. We'd been caught in a sudden storm and had to ride it out in a cove. She'd been scared at first, but then she'd fallen asleep with her head on my shoulder, trusting me to keep her safe. "Why are you showing me these?" I asked. "Because she wants you to know that those people in the pictures were real, that what you had was real, even if it got lost along the way." That afternoon, I took the Whitby out for a slow cruise around the harbor. No destination, just the need to move and think. The photos sat in the cockpit beside me, weighted down with a coffee mug. I'd catch glimpses of them as I steered, little flashes of a life that seemed like it belonged to someone else now. At the far end of the harbor, I dropped anchor near a small cafe I'd always liked, the kind of place that served good sandwiches and didn't care what kind of car you drove or what your bank account looked like. I was eating lunch on deck when I saw her. Sloane was walking along the waterfront promenade, alone. She'd traded her fancy wedding clothes for jeans and a simple blue sweater, the kind of outfit she used to wear when we'd spend weekends at the marina. She stopped when she saw the Whitby, and for a moment we just looked at each other across maybe 100 yards of water. Then she raised her hand in a small wave. I waved back. She didn't try to signal me to come to shore, and I didn't fire up the engine to go to her. We just acknowledged each other across the distance, and somehow that felt right. After a few minutes, she turned and walked away. But she looked back once before she disappeared around the bend. The sun was setting when I got back to my slip. Darius was waiting for me with a couple of beers and news. "Preston tried to get back into the country club this afternoon," he said, popping open a bottle. "Security turned him away. Word is, his membership's been revoked." Fast work. Rich people don't mess around when it comes to protecting their reputation. Preston became toxic the minute those recordings went public. We sat drinking beer and watching the last light fade from the sky. Other boat owners were coming back from day trips, calling out friendly greetings as they passed. "You know what's funny?" Darius said. "A year ago, these same people barely noticed you existed. Now they all want to shake your hand." He was right. I'd gotten more nods and smiles in the past few days than in the previous 6 months combined. Nothing like a little drama to make people pay attention. "Think it'll last?" I asked. "The attention? Probably not, but the respect will. You stood up for yourself without throwing a punch or raising your voice. That matters to people." My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Saw the story in the paper. Respect. A friend. I showed it to Darius. He shrugged. "Told you." That night, I spread Mrs. Patterson's business card on my small kitchen table, along with a legal pad and a pencil. If I was really going to think about starting my own restoration business, I needed to make some plans. The numbers looked better than I'd expected. Word of mouth in the boating community was everything, and the Whitby was a pretty good advertisement for my work. I had some savings, a good reputation, and now, apparently, people knew my name for the right reasons. I made a list of what I'd need: better tools, a workshop space, insurance, maybe an assistant for the bigger jobs. It wasn't impossible. Scary, maybe, but not impossible. My phone rang. Tito. "You busy tomorrow morning?" he asked. "Depends. What did you have in mind?" "Mrs. Patterson wants to meet. See if you two are a good fit for each other." I looked at the business plan scattered across my table, then out the window at the Whitby floating peacefully in her slip. "Set it up," I said. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." After I hung up, I picked up one of the photos Emma had given me. Sloane and me working on that friend's boat, both of us covered in paint and grinning like idiots. We'd been good together for a while. Really good. But people change, and sometimes they change in different directions. That didn't mean what we'd had was a lie. It just meant it wasn't forever. I put the photo back in the envelope and the envelope in a drawer. Not throwing it away, but not keeping it where I'd see it every day either. Some mornings, Sloane walked the promenade and looked out at my boat. I'd see her from the cockpit, a small figure in the distance. We never waved anymore, but she was there, and I was here. Maybe that was enough. Maybe knowing we'd both survived the wreckage was all the ending we needed. 6 months later, the sign went up. Reed Marine Restoration. Small and simple, hanging from the dock where I'd moved my expanded operation. The Whitby sat in the center slip, still my home but now also the centerpiece of a growing business. Mrs. Patterson's sailboat was in the slip next to her, nearly finished and looking like new. Two more boats waited their turn. I had an assistant now, Carlos from the marina, who decided he liked restoration work better than general maintenance. Jimmy helped out on weekends when he wasn't busy with his own projects. Business was steady, good, even. Boat owners appreciated quality work and they were willing to pay for it. I wasn't getting rich, but I was building something that belonged to me. Emma stopped by sometimes, usually with coffee and updates on Sloane. The divorce was final now. Sloane had kept most of her money. Preston's lawyers had been too distracted by his other legal problems to fight very hard. She was running the family hotels again, making changes, reportedly treating employees better than before. We never talked about her visiting. But some mornings, I'd see a figure on the promenade, and I'd know she was checking to make sure I was still here, still standing, still building, still refusing to disappear. The morning sun painted the harbor gold as I stood on the deck of the Whitby, coffee in hand, planning my day. Two boats to work on, a new client consultation at lunch, invoices to send out. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Beautiful boat, beautiful work. S. I looked toward the promenade, but it was empty. Just seagulls and early joggers and the promise of another good day. I typed back, "Thank you." Three dots appeared, then disappeared. No more messages. I put my phone away and started the day. There was work to do, bills to pay, a business to run, a life to live. The Whitby rocked gently beneath my feet, solid and dependable as always. The harbor stretched out before us, wide and blue and full of possibilities. Some mornings she still sees my boat offshore, and some mornings I see her looking. We don't wave anymore. We don't need to. We both know what we've learned. Dignity outlasts status. Proof beats performance. And when you know your worth, you don't need to shout. The light does all the talking.